everybody, it's Allison Williams here, your law firm mentor, and welcome to another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast, where this week we're going to talk about choices and priorities. So this is a topic that is fueled by a question that was posed to me recently by one of our clients here at Law Firm Mentor. And the question was, should I be taking calls from prospective new clients on nights and weekends? Should I take them in intake? Should I take them in sales conversations? So I always love when this topic comes up because there's a lot of strong opinions out there about what is the right way to build a law firm and whether or not you should be taking calls on hours that are not your normal business hours. So I want to give you both of the competing views on it and then give you a framework for actually making that decision for yourself. So the first thing that people will always go to when we talk about should I be taking calls after hours or on the weekends is what is the kind of business that you want to create, right? There's kind of become a movement, if you will, of lawyers that are building a lifestyle law firm. They want to be able to travel extensively. They want to be able to freely move in and out of doing work as they desire. And they don't want to be tethered to a desk or a brick and mortar business. So the advent of the virtual law firm, which, by the way, predated the pandemic, but we really started talking about it a lot during the pandemic because a lot of people, whether they wanted a virtual law firm or not, had to build one in order to keep practicing. So the virtual law firm, lifestyle law firm zealots, if you will, are out and about saying, under no circumstances should you ever take a call in an hour that you don't want to be working because you don't want to educate the public that you are not going to be available, that you will be available to them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? You don't want to put out that message. You don't want to start training people to expect that you are at their beck and call. And frankly, you're the boss. So you have a right to create the law firm the way you want, and you should only do what you truly desire to do. It's your business. Then on the flip side is the more traditional view, even though I know plenty of law firms that were never available after hours on nights and weekends, separate and apart from kind of the hustle and bustle and competitiveness of law firm practice. That was just simply not done in the industry. But if you take it back to the traditional line of thought that says, if you want to build something, you have to do any and everything that you can in order to get the most business in order to reach your income goals. So those proponents would say, take the calls when other lawyers won't so that you can advertise we're available when other lawyers aren't. You should come here, right? You kind of create yourself a little competitive advantage by virtue of being available when other lawyers won't. So when this question and this debate came up, I saw a flurry of different responses to the question. We have our own little private community here for our clients at Law Firm Mentor, and lots of people expressed a view. And then ultimately, the question was posed to me, how do you see the answer to this? And I said, the lawyer's answer that everyone hates, it depends. Now, it does not depend on what you desire to do, right? At the heart of it, you as the business owner can always decide what kind of business you want to create, right? That's always going to be what I tell people should be a consideration for what you want to do, i.e., you want to create a certain type of business. Making the decisions today from the place of that business owner is going to get you there faster. But there are some considerations that I think you have to go through analytically to decide this issue, not from a place of trying to appease people that are telling you you should have a lifestyle law firm, not from the place of people that want to scale an uber large law firm and say anything goes as long as a prospect wants it because that's how you make the most money, but from a place of what is going to make the most sense for you based on the business that you are creating. So here are those criteria. There's only 3, okay? So the first one is you have to think about your season of hustle, okay? No one should ever tell you that building a law firm is going to be easy peasy, casual, light work, light duty. You can do it 10 hours a week and make $1 million in a year, okay? That is not the experience for the statistical majority of lawyers that build law firms. Building a law firm is challenging because practicing law is challenging. And putting infrastructure, rules, systems, and profit processes in place in a law firm is going to be that much more challenging. So I'm never going to disabuse you of the fact that building a business is work. Now, when we say that it's work, it doesn't have to be drudgery. Okay. And a lot of times lawyers will create drudgery when they don't consider the fact that there is going to be a time where you're doing things that you don't enjoy because it serves the ultimate goal of getting you where you want to be, i.e., your season of hustle, right? So think about it this way, kind of a hard and fast rule. If your personal income is not at least six figures, you are in a season of hustle, okay? You should not be having a 9-to-5 Monday through Friday experience, spending your time on doing the things that are minimally required to serve your clients and little else if you have a 5-figure income. And by the way, I find that rule to be universal. Whether you have an affluent spouse at home who's paying all the bills and you don't really have to make money, or you're an heiress or an heir and you're going to take money from family members who have passed it down and thus you're not financially hurting, making $100,000 in your income, your personal income from your law firm, so that means your law firm revenue has to be higher, is not simply something that you should aspire to do because it's some arbitrary number. It really is a litmus test, right? Once you get to the point where you have a six-figure income, the light goes on, right? So there's a season where a lot of business owners, typically is going to be revenue around $200,000, right? Think of that 50% marker for a lower income company. When you're at that place where you have less than six figures, oftentimes the work that goes into getting the next client, creating the next system, turning on the marketing, often is so much additional work for you that you can have in your mindset that it's just not worth it, right? You can very easily become delimited by your status. So it's important that you get to that first six figures because that ultimately is where a lot of people will start to allow themselves to be hungry for more. Now, there are certainly some of you that were hungry from the very first dollar you made, and you stayed hungry all the way up until you had personal income of $500,000, right? So I'm not suggesting to you that only those that are at that are at six figures or more are going to be hungry for more. Ambition is very personal. But generally speaking, if you are working hard and you have not yet achieved a personal income of $100K, you are still in that season of hustle, and you need to remember that, okay? Now, the season of hustle is not perpetual, okay? You don't have to be all day hustling every single day to have a successful law firm. Many of you know I own the Williams Law Group in Short Hills, New Jersey. Many of you also know it is a multiple six-figure income, and I spend approximately 5 hours now a month on my law firm, okay? So I'm not required to still be hustling because I built the systems that do the hustle for me, right? I get to transition the hustle. But in my season of hustle, when I first started my law firm and I had very definitive income goals and very definitive career objectives that could only be met if I achieved my income goals, I was in a season of hustle. And that meant taking calls at the time that made the most sense for me to get the greatest opportunity to convert the most clients. And that included times that were convenient to those people, including nights and weekends. I actually began to prefer to meet people on the weekend largely because no one else was going to be in the office. And so I was going to have that quiet time to really think through their case. I was going to be able to give them that personal touch, that personal attention. And I was going to be able to structure a relationship with my future client that was going to be advantageous for my goals. Now, of course, that was where I was at that stage of my development. As I grew more capable, as my law firm scaled in size, I realized I didn't need to have that same season. That season transitioned into a season of evolution, right? My season of evolution was no longer hustling. It was taking what I had hustled up and evolving it into its own sustainable, continuing, recurring revenue. Okay, the second thing to consider when you're thinking about should I take calls on nights and weekends is your quality of life, okay? Quality of life is going to matter at all times as a business owner. Now, quality of life does not mean I either refuse to take calls on nights and weekends or I have quality of life, okay? A lot of us have binary thinking. Binary thinking is rarely going to serve your interests, right? We are in a very nuanced profession. It depends is the lawyer's answer for a host of reasons, and it's almost always the business owner's answer. So you have to think about quality of life, but not from the perspective of I either get it or I don't, But think about it as a continuum. Where are you on the spectrum of your quality of life? You could be at the place on your spectrum where quality of life is your highest priority right now, right? You could be in a season in your life where you have a lot of life stressors that are pulling on you, and your emotional and mental wherewithal is such that if you don't give yourself the consideration of your quality of life over everything else in your business, your goals, your dreams, your income, etc., you are going to break yourself, right? Someone that I know very personally, I won't identify how I know this person because I don't want to out them, right? But someone that I know very personally told me that at one point in time, he was going through a lot. So his wife had taken on a much more demanding job. So he was much more required to be available to his children. They have 3 children together. So he was doing the morning pickup and drop off. He was responsible for after school. He was also taking on some sporting activities. One of the children had mom very active in her cheerleading and some other areas of her life. Dad was now stepping into the area where mom couldn't because of mom's job. So a lot of that was taking on an emotional toll and a physical toll, right? There was only so many hours available. There was also the consideration that his father was dying. His father had dementia. His father is now deceased, but his father had dementia, and he was starting to want to not just spend more time with him because, of course, he knew he was ailing, but he also had questions and concerns about the caregivers. All this to say, there was a lot of life going on. But this person also wanted to build a business and needed to build a business because his income was going to be necessary for his children, and in particular, educating his children. That was something that was a high priority for him. He very much wanted to make sure that his children could afford to go to college. So he had to make a choice, right? He had to choose between, am I going to forfeit my quality of life? Am I going to take away from the things that are fueling my energy, that are giving me emotional support and nurturance, that are making me a successful father and husband? Or am I going to focus solely on doing everything that's possible to grow the business, right? And these could have been seen as competing objectives. I get one or the other. What we helped him to see is that it really was a combination, right? That means some of what you have to do in deciding is shifting. Sometimes you're going to be in full-on work mode, hustle, hustle, hustle. And sometimes you're going to pull back from that. You're going to create policies and procedures that will allow for you to decide, right? So you announce your policies as to when you're going to be available on nights and some weekends for your prospects. And other times the answer is simply no, right? It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Okay. Third and final criteria that you have to consider when you are thinking about, should I take calls on nights and weekends? The answer, the third criteria really deals about the footing that you want to establish in your business, all right? So what I mean by that is you have to have a strong enough footing in your business that a decision to turn down a client or a prospect is not a financial make it or break it, okay? So anytime you get to a state in your business, whether it is by sheer volume of revenue or by sheer volume of expenses, right? Because you can have $1 million business and have $999,099 of expenses, right? So we don't necessarily want to just focus on your top line revenue. You also want to focus on your profit. But when you think about the distance between your revenue and your profit, you have to ask yourself the question, that space in between there, if I say no to a person, if I say no to taking this call after hours or seeing this person on the weekend, is that a make it or break it? Okay. If more often than not, over the course of a 30-day period, you would say, yes, it is going to harm my finances if I say no to this person, then you're in a season where you don't have a strong enough footing to have a policy that's universally no nights and weekends, okay? At least not without having a consequence to that, right? So everything that you decide is always going to be driven by what you ultimately desire because you own the business. But there are times where you can make decisions that are best for you as an individual that are not necessarily the best for the business, but you decide it anyway because it's what you want, right? It fills you up. It takes you to a new level of happiness. This could be something like, I'm choosing to take on a particular practice area because I love it so much, even though it's not my most profitable practice area. I made that decision years ago when I decided to focus my practice on representing people accused of child abuse and neglect. For a whole lot of reasons that are very personal to me, I wanted to work in this area of the law. However, as a matrimonial attorney, I had previously represented celebrities, I had represented politicians, I'd represented very rich people. I had the ability to make a lot more money a lot faster serving as a matrimonial attorney. But I didn't make that choice because ultimately my heart was over here in a different practice area, right? So every decision that you make has a consequence. Now, that does not mean that you have to choose the negative ramifications of your choices. You simply have to find a way to make your choice into the profitable choice. And that's why I was able to build a multi-million-dollar law firm, even though I was helping people accused of child abuse, people that are economically least successful of all of the family law litigants that you would typically encounter in my state. I chose them and I found a way to make it profitable, right? So think about it the same way when you are evaluating this particular issue, right? When you're deciding, should I have a policy that says I'm all in for nights and weekends, or I'm never doing nights and weekends, or I'm going to do something in between. Some nights and weekends, some months not, or some weeks not, etc. When you're making that choice, you have to say, what is it that is most important to me as a value proposition? If what's most important to you is your goal, whatever your goal is, right? Your goal could be to have a $5 million law firm in 5 years. Your goal could be to have $200,000 of personal income. Your goal could be to set up a savings plan that affords you to save a certain amount of money for your children's education. And once you have that, all of your other needs are met. Whatever your goal is, the goal is not to judge your goal, but you do need to be clear on what that goal is. And then think about the time frame that you're going to want to achieve that goal, right? If you don't have the footing right now to be able to say no to nights and weekends in order that you ultimately can achieve that goal in the time that's defined for you, then I would recommend that you make that choice and say, I'm going to make this sacrifice in order to get what I desire. It really is that simple. It is never going to be the right thing or the wrong thing for you to take calls on nights and weekends. One day, you might ultimately get to a life like me, where I decide I might not work on Wednesday or Thursday, or I decide I might not work at all on Sundays, but I might love to work on Saturdays based on the needs of my life, the needs of my family, the needs of my other pursuits, my multiple businesses. I have to make those choices, right? You get to make those choices when you create a life that ultimately feeds your soul. And your business has to feed that life in order that you can have ultimately what makes you most happy. All right, everyone. I'm Allison Williams, your Law Firm Mentor. You've been listening to the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. Now, I am going to ask my marketing team to leave in the background that lovely little chirp that you just heard. That was my bird Versace. She always sits in here when I am recording podcasts, and my editing team has in the past cut her out because, of course, a bird all of a sudden coming out of nowhere doesn't necessarily fit with what we're talking about, but she does fit with the brand. And one of the things that I've created is a beautiful workplace where I get to have my pets here with me at the office. And so she said goodbye to you, and now I'm going to do the same. I'll see you next week.